Nneka was the most beautiful maiden in the village of Umuoma. Her beauty was the kind that turned heads wherever she went. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, her eyes sparkled like the river under moonlight, and her figure was the envy of all the other maidens. It was no surprise that men both young and old flocked to her, hoping to win her heart. But Nneka had no interest in any of them. "This one is too old," she would say, shaking her head at one suitor. "That one is too young," she would tell her friends. "And the rest, too poor." She knew exactly what she wanted in a husband: someone young, handsome, and most importantly, rich. She wanted a man who could give her a life of comfort and luxury. Her friends, Ada and Oluchi, often warned her, "Nneka, you're turning away all the good men in this village. Be careful before it's too late." But Nneka would toss her hair and laugh. "No man in this village is in my league. I will not settle for less." And so, she continued rejecting suitors, waiting for the perfect man to appear. Then one day, a stranger arrived in Umuoma, and Nneka's life changed forever. It was a quiet afternoon in Umuoma when the stranger arrived. He rode into the village on a horse, his robes flowing behind him. He was tall, strikingly handsome, and most importantly, he looked wealthy. The golden embroidery on his garments shimmered under the sun, and the necklace around his neck was made of the finest beads. Nneka was at the market with her friends when she first saw him. Her heart skipped a beat. "Who is that?" she whispered, her eyes following him. "I have never seen him before," Oluchi replied. "He must be from another village," Ada added. The man dismounted from his horse and walked through the marketplace, his eyes scanning the crowd. Then, his gaze landed on Nneka. A slow smile spread across his face as he made his way toward her. "You are the most beautiful maiden I have ever seen," he said smoothly. "I have traveled far and wide, but no one compares to you." Nneka felt a thrill rush through her. This was the kind of attention she had always wanted. A man who recognized her worth. A man who could offer her everything. "My name is Obina," the stranger continued. "I am from a neighboring village, and I have always admired you from afar. I have come to ask for your hand in marriage." Gasps echoed through the marketplace. It was unheard of for a man to propose so quickly. Ada pulled Nneka aside and whispered urgently, "Nneka, be careful. You do not know this man." Oluchi nodded in agreement. "At least take your time to learn more about him." But Nneka barely heard them. She was too captivated by Obina's presence, his wealth, and his charm. "I accept," she said without hesitation. Her friends looked at her in shock, but Nneka didn't care. She had finally found the man of her dreams. Little did she know, she had just sealed her fate. The news of Nneka's sudden engagement spread through Umuoma like wildfire. The villagers murmured among themselves, surprised that she had accepted a proposal from a complete stranger so quickly. Many believed something was not right, but Nneka ignored the whispers. She was marrying the richest and most handsome man she had ever seen. That was all that mattered. Her parents, though initially hesitant, gave their blessing when they saw the wealth Obina possessed. He showered them with gifts, bags of rice, expensive clothes, and cowries more than they had ever seen. "The gods have blessed us," Nneka's mother exclaimed, delighted by the gifts. The marriage was arranged immediately. There were no lengthy courtship rituals, no deep inquiries into Obina's family background. Within days, a grand wedding was held, with drummers, dancers, and feasts that lasted all night. But amid the celebrations, Ada and Oluchi remained uneasy. "This is too fast," Ada muttered. "Something is not right about this man." "But Nneka won't listen to us," Oluchi sighed. And she didn't. Nneka was too blinded by love, or perhaps by the illusion of love. As night fell, Obina approached her. "It is time for us to leave for my village," he said, his voice smooth but firm. Nneka was excited. She would finally see the grand village where her rich husband came from. She bid farewell to her family and friends, mounted Obina's horse, and rode off into the night. She had no idea she was heading toward a place she would never escape from. The journey to Obina's village was long and silent. The deeper they traveled into the forest, the colder the air became. The trees loomed taller, their branches twisting unnaturally as if whispering secrets to the wind. Nneka shivered but brushed off her unease. "It is just the night air," she told herself. Finally, They arrived at the village. It was unlike any village Nneka had ever seen. The huts were large and well built, and the air smelled of fresh herbs and burning wood. But something was off. There were very few people outside, and those she saw quickly disappeared into their homes upon seeing them. Obinna helped her down from the horse and led her into his grand hut. It was beautiful, decorated with rare fabrics and golden ornaments. "You must be tired, my love," he said. "Rest now." As she settled in, Obinna's tone became serious. "There is one rule you must follow in this village," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, you must never step outside at night." Nneka frowned. "Why?" "It is for your own safety," Obinna said, his voice low. "You are my wife now, and I only want to protect you. Swear to me that you will never disobey this rule." Nneka hesitated but then nodded. "I swear." Obinna smiled and kissed her forehead. "Good. Now rest, my love." That night, as Nneka lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. But she pushed the thoughts aside and closed her eyes, unaware that her nightmare had only just begun. The first few days in Obinna's village passed quietly. He treated Nneka like a queen, providing her with the finest food, beautiful clothes, and golden jewelry. But something always felt off. The villagers avoided her, whispering whenever she walked by. No one spoke to her except Obinna, and most strangely, the village seemed completely silent at night. One evening, as Nneka sat outside their hut, she noticed something unusual. The village, which had been bustling during the day, was eerily empty after sunset. "Where does everyone go at night?" she asked Obinna. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "They rest early here. It is our way." That night, as Nneka lay in bed, she heard whispers outside, low, strange murmurs that sent chills down her spine. She sat up, straining her ears. The voices did not belong to humans. They were deep, hollow, and echoing like the wind through an empty cave. Her heart pounded. "Is it just my imagination?" She turned to Obinna, but he was fast asleep, or so it seemed. His breathing was unusually slow, his body completely still. The whispers grew louder. Then, for a split second, Nneka squeezed her eyes shut and pulled the covers over her head. She reminded herself of Obinna's warning, never step outside at night. But deep inside her, curiosity and fear began to battle, and she knew that sooner or later, she would break the rule. Days passed, but the unease in Nneka's heart only grew stronger. Every night, the whispers returned. Some nights, there were faint murmurs carried by the wind. Other nights, they were louder, urgent, almost desperate. And always, they were followed by eerie silence. Nneka tried to ignore them, but she couldn't ignore something else: Obinna's strange behavior. During the day, he was warm and loving, always by her side, treating her with kindness. But at night, as soon as darkness fell, he would go to bed early and become eerily still, as if he were no longer human. She also noticed something peculiar: he never ate during the evening meals. While she sat at the table, he would simply watch her with an unreadable expression. "Are you not hungry?" she asked one night. Obinna smiled. "I eat at a different time," he replied. "Do not worry about me." His words did nothing to ease her growing fear. Then there was the way the villagers acted, avoiding her gaze, answering her questions with forced smiles, and disappearing into their homes before the sun set. One evening, as she walked through the marketplace, an old woman grabbed her wrist. Her fingers were cold, her grip firm. "Child," the woman whispered, her eyes darting around nervously. "You do not belong here." A chill ran down Nneka's spine. "What do you mean?" she asked. Before the woman could answer, another villager yanked her away. "Do not speak to her," he hissed. "Do you want trouble?" The old woman trembled and hurried away, leaving Nneka standing there, her mind racing. Something was terribly wrong in this village, and she was determined to find out what it was. That night, Nneka could not sleep. The old woman's warning echoed in her mind. "You do not belong here." She lay awake, listening to the whispers outside. They were louder than before, rising and falling like a sorrowful chant. The air inside the hut felt heavy, pressing against her chest. She turned to Obinna. He lay beside her, motionless as usual. His chest barely moved, and his skin looked pale under the dim light of the lantern. A sudden thought crossed her mind: what if he is not truly asleep? Her heart pounded as she slowly reached out, her fingers trembling. She touched his arm, ice cold. She quickly withdrew her hand, suppressing a gasp. Something was definitely wrong. Gathering her courage, she slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound. She tiptoed to the door and pressed her ear against it. The whispers were even clearer now. And then, she heard something else, faint footsteps moving outside. She held her breath. Someone or something was out there. She had sworn to obey Obina's rule, but now, she had to know the truth. With shaking hands, she slowly pushed the door open and stepped into the night. What she saw made her blood run cold. The night air was thick and heavy, carrying an unnatural chill that sent shivers down Nneka's spine. The village, which had seemed normal during the day, was now transformed into something unrecognizable. A pale mist curled around the huts, and the ground felt strangely soft beneath her feet, as if she were walking on something that wasn't solid. The whispers she had heard from inside the hut were no longer distant, they were all around her. Then she saw them. Figures draped in white moved through the village square, their forms barely solid, flickering like dying flames. They gathered in a circle around something she couldn't see, swaying and chanting in voices that sounded neither human nor animal. Nneka's heart pounded. Are they spirits? She took a cautious step forward, trying to get a better view. But then she froze. At the center of the gathering stood Obina, but he was no longer the man she had married. His body was translucent, his handsome face distorted into something hollow and lifeless. His eyes glowed an eerie shade of blue, and his lips moved in sync with the spirit's chant. Nneka clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. My husband is not a man. He is one of them. Suddenly, one of the spirits turned its head sharply in her direction. Its hollow eyes locked onto hers. The chanting stopped. The air grew still. And then, as one, the spirits turned toward her. Nneka's breath caught in her throat. She had been seen. She turned and ran. Nneka sprinted through the village, her heart pounding like a drum. The air behind her rippled with an unnatural chill as the spirits gave chase. Their whispers turned into eerie wails, rising and falling like a ghostly song. She didn't dare look back. She only knew one thing: she had to get out of this village. Her feet barely touched the ground as she ran past empty huts, their doors swaying open as if the village itself were alive. The once familiar paths twisted in ways she didn't recognize. It was as if the village was shifting, trapping her inside. Somebody help me! She screamed into the night. No answer. Only the wails of the spirits behind her. Then, she saw the entrance to the village, the path they had taken after her wedding. If she could reach it, maybe she could escape. She pushed herself harder, lungs burning, legs trembling. The exit was only a few steps away when a cold, invisible force wrapped around her waist and yanked her backward. She hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. When she looked up, Obina stood over her, but he was no longer pretending to be human. His face was twisted into something monstrous, his eyes glowing, his mouth stretching wider than should be possible. His once golden robes fluttered like smoke, his entire form flickering between solid and transparent. You disobeyed me, Nneka, his voice echoed, deep and hollow. You broke the rule. The spirits surrounded her now, their whispers forming a chorus of doom. Tears streamed down Nneka's face as she scrambled backward. Please, let me go. Obina tilted his head, his eerie smile never fading. You are my wife, Nneka. There is no escape. The spirits lunged. Darkness swallowed her. Nneka's scream was swallowed by the darkness as a powerful force dragged her downward. It felt as though the earth had opened beneath her, pulling her into a void of endless cold. Shadows swirled around her, whispering in voices she couldn't understand. When she finally landed, she found herself in a place that was neither night nor day, a world bathed in an eerie blue glow. The ground was not earth but a smooth, glass-like surface that reflected her terrified face. She turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The landscape stretched infinitely, filled with wandering spirits, their hollow eyes staring at her in sorrow. Then, Obina appeared, but now, he was in his true form, a towering figure, neither fully human nor fully spirit. His face remained handsome but cold, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. His once luxurious robes now fluttered like tattered mist. You are home now, my love, he said, his voice echoing in the emptiness. Nneka trembled. This is not my home. Please, let me go. Obina's expression remained unreadable. You chose me. You married me. Now, you belong to me forever. The spirits around them wailed softly, as if mourning her fate. Nneka shook her head violently. No, this is not what I wanted. Obina stepped closer, his presence making the air colder. It is too late. A wave of realization hit her like a storm. She had ignored every warning, blinded by wealth and beauty, and now she was trapped in a world she didn't understand, a bride to a ghost, bound to a realm beyond the living. Her body weakened, her vision blurred. The last thing she heard was Obina's voice whispering in her ear, "You will never leave." Nneka's body felt weightless, as though she was floating between life and death. The cold of the underworld seeped into her bones, and the voices of the spirits echoed around her, whispering secrets she could not understand. Her mind raced. Is this how I will end? Trapped forever as a ghost's bride? She looked around desperately. The spirits surrounding her were not attacking her. They were staring at her with sorrowful eyes. It was as if they too were trapped in this cursed realm. Summoning the last of her strength, she turned to Obina. Why me? She demanded, her voice hoarse. Why did you choose me? Obina's expression did not change, but his glowing eyes flickered for a brief moment. I have always loved beauty, he said, his voice deep and hollow. I once lived among humans long ago, but I was betrayed and cursed to exist between worlds. Nneka's heart pounded. Cursed? Obina nodded. I can only return to the land of the living if I take a bride, a woman who willingly marries me. But each time, they tried to run, and each time, they become part of my world. Nneka's stomach twisted. The spirits around me, they were all his wives. She stumbled back. No, I won't stay here. Obina sighed. You have no choice. But deep in her heart, Nneka refused to accept her fate. If she had been foolish enough to fall into this trap, then she would find a way to escape, even if it meant defying the spirits themselves. She had one final chance. She just had to figure out how. Nneka's mind raced. She had to escape, but how? The underworld stretched endlessly, and the spirits surrounding her had once been just like her wives, who had tried to run but failed. But she wasn't going to fail. She refused to accept this fate. She turned to Obina, swallowing her fear. You said your curse can be broken if a woman willingly marries you. What happens if she rejects you? For the first time, Obina hesitated. Nneka's heart pounded. That's it. That's the weakness. If I don't love you, if I refuse you, does the curse remain? She pressed. Obina's glowing eyes darkened. You have already chosen me, he said slowly. You cannot undo it. But I don't love you, Nneka shouted, her voice echoing through the void. I was blinded by wealth and beauty, but I do not love you. I reject you, Obina. The spirits around them gasped, their whispers rising in urgency. A sudden wind tore through the underworld, making the mist swirl violently. Obina's expression twisted into one of rage. It is too late for rejection, he growled. You are mine now. The spirits wailed as the darkness thickened, swallowing Nneka's vision. She felt herself being pulled deeper, her body no longer her own. She screamed, struggling against the unseen force. No! Let me go! Obina reached for her, his hands turning to shadows. You will never leave. Nneka fought, clawing at the darkness, but it was useless. The last thing she saw was Obina's cold, glowing eyes before everything went black. No one in her village ever saw Nneka again. Some say she ran away. Others say she was taken by something not of this world. But on quiet nights, when the wind whispers through the trees, some claim they hear a woman's voice crying out, a voice calling for freedom that will never come. Nneka had married a handsome man, but she never knew he was a ghost. And now, she was one too. The end. Please subscribe.